Okay, today's notes are going to be on creating parallel and perpendicular line equations. This is going to be an extension of the notes that we took before, where we were trying to find out what parallel and perpendicular lines meant or identifying them. Let's just do a little bit of review before we jump into this, because again, it is going to come in handy. So let's just review real quick. Parallel lines are two lines that have the same slope and different y-intercepts. Perpendicular lines are going to be two lines whose slopes are opposite reciprocals of each other. Remember, for perpendicular lines, two things need to happen, right? You need to switch two things. You need to switch the sign and you need to switch the fraction. So let's go ahead and highlight a couple of those. Let's see, parallel lines, they need to have the same slope, different y-intercepts. For perpendicular lines, we need to have slopes that are opposite reciprocals. Okay, so it says note parallel lines can be represented with that forward slash, that double forward slash. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight this one. When I see that double forward slash symbol, you're going to know that that means parallel. And perpendicular lines can be shorthanded by writing like that upside down T. That means perpendicular. Okay, so I'm going to be using that a lot in these lessons. So just understand for two double lines, I mean, you can tell like they're parallel, right? And then the other one, the upside down T, they make perpendicular because they make like a little 90 degrees right there. So for the following examples, find the slope of a line that would be parallel and perpendicular to the given line. Just like last time, it's super important that first we figure out what is the original slope on these equations. And then from there, I'll be able to tell, oh, okay, well, if the slope is this, then in order to get a parallel line, I need to have the same slope. In order to have a perpendicular line, I need opposite reciprocal. So the first thing I'm going to notice is in this one, let me go ahead and take a different colored highlighter. In this one, my slope is 2 over 5 because this is in slope intercept form. So my first slope is equal to 2 over 5. There's no work for me to do there. I know what my first slope is. If my slope is 2 over 5, then to get a parallel slope, I need to have the exact same slope. So if I have my first slope as 2 over 5, then the slope that's going to be parallel also needs a 2 over 5. If I want a perpendicular slope, then I need to take the opposite reciprocal. The opposite reciprocal, well, instead of a positive, I'm going to need a negative. And instead of 2 over 5, I need to change it to 5 over 2. So I know if I'm going to have a parallel line, the slope needs to be 2/5. If I'm going to have a perpendicular line, the slope needs to be negative 5 over 2. Okay, let's take a look at the second one. I got y equals negative 4x minus 11. Again, in this case, it's kind of easy because they already tell me what the slope is. I already know that the slope is negative 4. So I'm going to say my first slope is negative 4. If I want a parallel slope, I'm going to call this M2. If I want a parallel slope, then the slope needs to be exactly the same. So if my first slope was negative 4, then my second slope needs to be negative 4. However, if I want a perpendicular slope, then I can't use that negative 4, right? I need to take the opposite reciprocal of it. My third slope for the perpendicular line, I need to do the opposite reciprocal. So remember, you need to change two things. That negative needs to turn into a positive, and that fraction of 4, that's not really a fraction. So I'm going to do this kind of on the side. That 4, if I were to change it into a fraction, it would turn into 1 and whoa. That's so wrong. That 4, if I were to change it into a fraction, I would just put a 1 underneath. So 4 is a fraction. It's just 4 over 1. And if I'm going to take the reciprocal of that, then I need to change it to a 1 over 4. So the perpendicular slope would be 1 over 4. Okay. Yeah, opposite reciprocal of -4 is positive 1 over 4. And that would be it. All right, here's where things get a little bit different. Take a look at this third problem. I have 2x minus 6y equals 15. I want to come up with a parallel and perpendicular lines. The problem is I'm looking at this and I have no idea what my slope is just yet. So in order for me to understand what the slope is, I need to change this into slope-intercept form first. And to do that, I'm going to solve for y. So let me go ahead and subtract 2x on both sides. These are going to cancel. I get negative 6y is equal to negative 2x plus 15 because I cannot combine those terms. They're not like terms. And then I'm going to divide everything by negative 6. Divide by negative 6, divide by negative 6, divide by negative 6. These are going to cancel. I'm going to get y equals. Now that negative 2 divided by negative 6, you got to treat that like a fraction. It simplifies. First of all, the negatives are going to cancel, so it's going to turn positive. Second of all, that 2 over 6 simplifies. If I take 2 over 6 and I divide top and bottom by 2 over 2, that becomes 1 over 3. So this becomes 1/3 x plus. Same thing with that 15 over 6. If I divide the top and bottom by 3, then that becomes 5 over 2. Notice that's a positive divided by a negative. Let me go ahead and change that. Positive divided by a negative. This is going to give me a negative answer, and that's going to be 5 over 3. Honestly, I really don't care about that 5 over 3. What I do care about is that now I know my first slope is equal to 1 over 3. We did all of that work just to figure out what the slope is. The slope is 1/3. Now, if the slope of that equation is 1/3, then that means that the parallel slope has to be the exact same thing. It's still going to be 1/3. That also means that the perpendicular slope needs to be the opposite reciprocal. Well, it was positive, so we're going to do the opposite. We're going to change it to a negative. And it was 1 over 3, but we're going to flip that fraction from 1 over 3 to 3 over 1. And remember, 3 divided by 1 is just 3. Let me go ahead and write all that out. That's negative 3 over 1, which is just negative 3. All right, hopefully that made sense to you. We're almost done with this first part. I got y minus 4 is equal to 5 times parentheses x plus 4. I want to go ahead and find the parallel slope and the perpendicular slope. This isn't in y equals mx plus b form, so if you don't recognize that the slope is 5, you've got some work to do. We're going to go ahead and distribute that 5. This becomes y minus 4 is equal to 5x plus 20. I'm going to add 4 to both sides. I get y equals 5x plus 24. Now that I have that, I'm going to go ahead and say that my first slope is 5. If I want a parallel line, then the slope needs to stay the same, so the slope needs to stay 5. If I want a perpendicular line, then I need to take the opposite reciprocal of 5. The opposite of a positive is a negative, and the reciprocal of 5 is 1 over 5. And those would be the slopes of my given equations. All right. Honestly, that's half the battle. So we're going to be creating parallel and perpendicular line equations. The hard part is just getting the right slope, right? You need to know, like, oh, if you want the parallel lines, you need a same slope. If you want a perpendicular line, you need the opposite reciprocal. So let me go ahead and go over the steps to creating parallel and perpendicular lines passing through a given point. Step number 1, first, we're going to find the necessary slope for your line. Just like we did right now. If it's a parallel line, you want the same slope. So let me go ahead and highlight that. Same slope if you want a parallel line. And you want the opposite reciprocal if you're dealing with a perpendicular line. Just like you saw above, This might require you to rewrite your original equation into slope-intercept form. So like for the first two problems, we didn't have to do anything. Like I already knew what my slope was going to be because it was already in slope-intercept form. But on problems number 3 and 4, since I didn't know what the slope was, you have to rewrite it into y equals mx plus b form. And then you can try to figure out, oh, okay, that must mean my slope is this. Once you're done with that and you know exactly what your slope is, you're going to substitute your new slope, whether it's the same slope or the opposite reciprocal, back into y equals mx plus b, and you're going to substitute it in for your m. You're also going to plug in a point. I forgot to write that in. Let's go ahead and change that right now. Plug in your point. Actually, we should be doing that here. Let me change this, sorry. We're going to plug in my point and solve for b. Last step is you're going to rewrite your equation with your new slope and your new b. All right, I know that seems like a lot, but honestly, like once you understand like the groove, you go, oh, okay, that's really not too bad. All right. So let's look at the first one. It says find the equation of the line parallel to y equals negative 2/3 x plus 6, and I want it passing through the point 9 comma 4. Okay. Step number 1, I need to find what my new slope is going to be. Well, I know that my old slope was negative 2/3. If my old slope is negative 2/3, then that means that my parallel slope must be negative 2/3. In fact, let me write it like this. If my old slope is negative 2/3, then the parallel slope must be negative 2/3. I'm done with step 1. I found the necessary slope of my line. Step number 2 says substitute my new slope. Okay, well, my new slope is negative 2/3 into my y equals mx plus b. So I'm going to write y equals, what's my new slope? My new slope is negative 2/3 x plus b. In fact, let me go ahead and write it like this. Y equals mx plus b. And all I did was I substituted that new slope right here. Step number 3, we're going to plug in my point and I'm going to solve for b. Remember that I want it to be passing through the point 9 comma 4. In that 9 comma 4, this is going to be my x. This is going to be my y. So I'm going to substitute these values in here. I'm going to write 4 equals negative 2/3 times x, which in this case is 9, plus b. Now, at this point, some students are going to freak out. They're going to say fractions. I don't like fractions. I don't know how to do fractions. Of course you know how to do fractions. You just forgot. You've been doing fractions since 4th grade. Okay, so I have two numbers that are being multiplied together. This is a fraction. This one's not. Well, I can't multiply those because they're not both fractions. Let's change the other one into a fraction by putting it over 1. Now it's really easy to multiply. You're just going to multiply straight across. I got negative 2 times 9. That's going to be a negative 18 on the top. And then I have a 3 times 1. That's going to be a 3 plus b. That just says negative 18 divided by 3. And negative 18 divided by 3 is negative 6. So this is 4 equal to negative 6 plus b. We're going to add 6 to both sides because we're solving for b. These are going to cancel. And I get 10 equals b. I just finished step number 3, which was to solve for b. This is my b. The last step is to go back and rewrite your equation using your new slope, which we said was negative 2/3, and my new b, which we just said is 10. So let's put it all together. I'm going to write my equation y equals mx plus b, but this time I'm going to substitute that m. Y equals negative 2/3 x plus, and I'm going to substitute that b. My b is 10. And this is my final answer. What do I know about this line? Well, we know two things. Number one, I know it's going to be parallel to the original equation. And number two, I know it's going to pass through the point 9, 4. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the next one. I want to find the equation of the line perpendicular to y equal to 4x plus 7 with an x-intercept of 8. So same concept. I'm going to go ahead and start this problem off. The first thing I want to do is I want to find what kind of slope am I dealing with? Well, because this is in slope-intercept form, I already know that this slope is 4 to begin with. My original slope is 4. Because I know my original slope, and because I want this to be perpendicular, then I know that my other slope needs to be the opposite reciprocal. So the opposite of a positive is a negative. The reciprocal of 4, well, that should be 4 over 1. When I flip it, it becomes 1 over 4. And I know what my new slope has to be. My new slope has to be negative 1 over 4. Okay, next part. It says, I want an x-intercept of 8. Well, let me go ahead and start writing my equation first. I know that I have y equals mx plus b, except now I know what my slope is. I know that my slope needs to be negative 1/4. So let me write this as y equals negative 1/4 x plus b. All right, the second part, what step am I on? I'm on step 3. I already substituted my new slope into my y equals mx plus b. Step 3 is I'm going to plug in my point, and then I'm going to solve for b. This is kind of weird because they really don't explicitly say what point I have, but they do have an x-intercept of 8. If I were to kind of draw it, an x-intercept of 8, I would say it's like right here at the number 8. What's the coordinates here? The coordinates here are 8, 0. So they did give me a point because they told me that the x-intercept was 8, but they gave it to me in a really tricky way, okay? The x-intercept is 8, which means I have 8, 0, which means this is my x and this is my y. I'm just going to substitute those values. I get 0 is equal to negative 1/4 times 8 plus b. Just like last time, this looks really complicated. It's not. I'm just going to put this over 1, and that becomes 0 is equal to negative 8 over 4 plus b. Negative 8 divided by 4, that's just negative 2 plus b. I'm going to add 2 to both sides to get b by itself. These are going to cancel, and I get 2 is equal to b. I'm done with step 3. I found my value for b. Now I'm just going to put it all together. I got y equals negative 1/4. Sorry, let me write the original equation, mx plus b. But now I got y equals, what is my slope? My new slope is going to be negative 1/4 x plus my new b is going to be 2. What do I know about this equation? Well, I know a couple of things. I know that it's going to be perpendicular to y equals 4x plus 7. And I know it's going to have an x-intercept of 8. Okay, let me just show you this in practice so that way you can see exactly what we just said. Here's a graph, and I have both of the equations that we just talked about. So this is my original equation. There's y equal to 4x plus 7. What did I say about this new line that I just created? I said it was going to be A, perpendicular, and B, it was going to pass through an x-intercept of 8. Check this out when I turn this on. Yes, that is making a 90-degree angle right here, so it is perpendicular. And yes, it is passing through the point 8, 0, just like I said. So I just want you to understand, like, these equations are working exactly the way we thought they were. All right, let's go ahead and continue on. I'm going to go a little bit faster on the next ones, just because I don't want the video to be super long. These are going to be a little bit more complicated just because they did not give me the slope right away, but we're going to do exactly what we did previously. We're going to put these into y equals mx plus b form. I want to find the equation of the line that's parallel to 2x plus 10y equal to 24. I don't know what the slope is, so I need to get the slope first. Let's try that out. I got 2x plus 10y is equal to 24. In order for me to solve for this, I need to go ahead and subtract 2x from each side. I get 10y is equal to negative 2x plus 24. Divide everything by 10. These are going to cancel. I get y equals negative 1/5 x plus 24 over 10. That's going to simplify by 2 to 12 over 5. All right, now that I have these, I know that my slope is going to be negative 1 over 5. And this time I want a parallel line. So what does that tell me? That tells me if my old slope was negative 1/5, then my new slope is negative 1/5. All right, now that I have this, let's go ahead and start our process. I know my new slope is negative 1/5, so when I go y equals mx plus b, then I know this is going to be y equals negative 1/5 x plus b. Now I need this to pass through the point negative 2 comma 6. So let's go ahead and substitute this value in. I got 6 equals negative 1/5 times my x, which in this case is negative 2 plus b. Unfortunately, we are going to be dealing with fractions on this problem, and sometimes that's just the way it is. So we're going to go ahead and put this over 1. Negative times a negative is going to give me a positive. 1 times 2 is 2 over 5 plus b. Now, I'd say that this is going to be a little bit tougher because I have those fractions here. I'm going to subtract 2. Let me rewrite this over here. 6 equals 2/5 plus b. I'm going to subtract 2/5 from each side. These are going to cancel. Over here, I have 6 minus 2/5 equals b. Unfortunately, I can't subtract those because they don't have, one's a fraction and one is not. So I'm going to put this over 1. And I still can't subtract those because they don't have the same denominator. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get that 1 to have the same denominator. So I'm going to do this on the side. 6 over 1. If I multiply that by 5 over 5, that becomes 30 over 5. So 6 over 1 is the same thing as 30 over 5. I'm going to rewrite it so that it looks like 30 over 5 minus 2/5 equals b. Now that they have the same denominator, I can go ahead and combine them. 30 minus 2 is going to give me a 28 over 5 equals b. Remember that when you add and subtract denominators, you have the same thing. You keep the denominators the same. Finally, I found my b. Yes, it was a little bit of work. Yes, you're dealing with fractions, but I mean, at this point, you have to know how to deal with them, okay? And now I'm just going to put it all together. So instead of y equals mx plus b, I'm going to rewrite this so that it looks like y equals, my slope was negative 1/5 x plus my y-intercept is 28 over 5. And this is going to be my final equation. What do I know about this equation? I know it's going to be parallel to the first line, and I know it's going to pass perfectly through the point negative 2 comma 6. All right, and we're dealing with the last one over here. It says find the equation of the line perpendicular to y minus 1/5 equal to 1/3 x minus 4 with the y-intercept of 2. Same thing here. I don't have this in y equals mx plus b form. So I'm going to go ahead and add 5 to both sides. Notice that this time I did not have to distribute. So let's see. Let me write the equation again. Y minus 5 is equal to 1/3 x minus 4. All I'm going to do is I'm going to add 5 to both sides. These are going to cancel. I get y equals 1/3 x plus 1. My slope, in this case, is 1/3. Because I want a perpendicular line, my slope needs to change. So if my original slope was 1/3, then my new slope needs to be negative 3 over 1, right? We got to change the sign, and I got to flip the fraction. Well, negative 3 over 1 is just the same thing as negative 3. So I know exactly what my slope is. My slope is negative 3. Let me go ahead and start finding my equation now. I have y equals mx plus b, but I know my slope is negative 3. So I'm going to write y equals negative 3x plus b, because again, this is my new slope now. Whoops, that's the wrong color. So I'm done with step, I think 2. Step 3 is to substitute your point. This time they told me I have a y-intercept of 2. So let me go ahead and highlight that one. I have a y-intercept of 2. What does that look like? On your graph, a y-intercept of 2 means on your y-axis, it would cross right here at 2. What's the coordinates for this point right here? This would be 0, 2. So I need to use this point, 0, 2, where this is my x and this is my y. I get 2 equals negative 3 times 0 plus b. I just substituted my values. That's 2 equals 0 plus b, which means 2 is equal to b. I found my b value, my y-intercept. Last step is to put it all together. I'm going to write y equals mx plus b. Y equals, my slope is negative 3x plus my y-intercept is 2. And there is my final answer. I know this is going to be perpendicular to the original equation, and I know that this is going to have a y-intercept of 2. All right, guys, we have one more thing. I know that this has been a long notes, but we're almost done. It says special cases, vertical and horizontal lines. For parallel lines, if the original line is vertical, then the parallel line must also be vertical. Just because vertical lines don't have slopes, so it's kind of hard to talk about slopes when the slope is undefined, okay? Similarly, if the original line is horizontal, then the parallel line must also be horizontal. That's just saying your lines have to be matching up if they're parallel, right? If the first one's vertical, the second one's vertical. First one's horizontal, then your second one's horizontal. Sorry about that. I don't know why that appeared. For perpendicular lines, remember, perpendicular means opposite reciprocal. So we're going to do the exact opposite. If the original line is vertical, then a perpendicular line must be its opposite, which is horizontal. And vice versa, which means if the original one was horizontal, the perpendicular line must be vertical. So problem number 1 says, I want a parallel line to this one passing through negative 2, negative 5. All right, well, here is the first graph, and I want the new graph to pass through negative 2, negative 5. Here's negative 2, negative 5. I want it to be parallel. If I want it to be parallel, then that means my line must be vertical, so that way they never touch. Now that I have that, you need to give me the equation of that line. Remember, vertical lines, the equations for this line is, you see that every single x value is negative 2. The other way you can think of it is it's crossing my x-axis at a value of negative 2. So this is the x equal negative 2 line. This is a lesson we did a while ago. I want to say about last week sometime. All right, I want to do the exact same thing. This time, though, I want to find a perpendicular line that's passing through the point 4, negative 3. 4, negative 3. Here's 4, negative 3 would be down here. This time, you want it to be perpendicular. So obviously, you don't want it running the exact same way. In fact, you want it running the opposite way. So instead of being vertical like the other one, since it's a perpendicular line, we want it running left and right. And again, you need to know how to come up with these equations. You can think of it like this. All the y values here are negative 3 on every single point on the line. You can also think of it as, hey, this is my y-axis and it's crossing at negative 3. So your equation is going to be the y equal to negative 3 line. And that's it. That's all the notes for today. Hopefully that answered all your questions. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask.